Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're tuning in from. My name's Avery. I'm one of the development assistants here at the White Coat Waste Project, and I'll be moderating our discussion today on the Wuhan Lab Leak campaign. I'm joined here with Justin Goodman, our Senior Vice President, and Daniel Lopez, our Research Manager. I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit more about your roles, what you guys do here. Oh, I think you're muted, Justin. There we go. Oh, nope, still can't hear you. Oh, no. Well, we figured that out. Daniel, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Daniel Lopez, and I'm the research manager at White Coat Waste Project. What I do is lead the investigations for the organization, and basically what that means is submitting Freedom of Information Act or open record requests to government agencies or universities and try to learn more about what the government is spending their money on when it comes to animal experiments. Likewise, I am constantly checking government databases and other types of databases just to find these like wasteful and cruel experiments.
Important work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Justin, you want to try again?
Am I still?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Great. Okay. Awesome. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Avery and Daniel. I'm the Senior Vice President here at White Coat Waste Project. I've been here. I started in 2016. I've been doing work to get animals out of labs for about 20 years. And my work here involves working with Congress and the media to get the word out and to get lawmakers to take action to help us expose and defund animal labs, both here in the United States and around the world. The federal government, a lot of people don't realize, is the single largest funder of animal testing, not only in the country, but in the entire world. And we waste about $20 billion a year on these cruel experiments. And not only are there over 1,000 animal laboratories getting taxpayer money in the United States, but there's hundreds, over 300 animal labs in foreign countries, in over 50 countries, including China and Russia, that are authorized to get tax money from the US government for specifically for animal experiments. And obviously our worldwide waste campaign and our Wuhan campaign have exposed over the last few years the extent to which taxpayer dollars are flowing to these foreign labs with virtually no accountability and transparency.
Wow. Oh, yeah. So that's a big part of our job, is spreading awareness that that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we wanted to get together today and just answer a couple of questions for you guys regarding how we find and expose government waste, specifically go more in depth on our Wuhan lab campaign and the COVID-19 pandemic origins. So I'll start with some questions we had sent in beforehand. Please feel free to drop questions in the comments in the chat. And let me preface it too and just say that this recording will be available after the live ends. We have so much information on our website and our blog, so if you're interested, definitely check that out too. And I'll jump right in. So our first question is, what process did you guys take to get to the conclusion that the pandemic might be linked to the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Like, how did we find it?
So, Daniel, you want to take this?
Right.
Okay, I'll start. So back in 2018, so let's rewind about 5 years ago, we exposed a federal lab here right near Washington, D.C. That was spending tax dollars to fly staff to China and other foreign countries to go to the wet markets where they sell dogs and cats and other animals to be slaughtered and eaten. And these federal employees were buying cat and dog meat in China and then flying it back to the United States and force feeding it to kittens in what we called kitten cannibalism experiments at the USDA. And we shut those experiments down. They had gone on since the 80s, had received over $20 million in funding. Over 3,000 kittens were killed in these experiments. We exposed that in 2018, shut it down, and actually we saved over a dozen cats, and 2 of them now live with our president, Anthony, Petite and Delilah. And if you go on our website, you can read their story there. So that was our, the kitten cannibalism campaign was when we first kind of got wind that there was tax money flowing to foreign countries for animal experiments. And in 2019, we started to put the pieces together and found that there was over 30 laboratories in Russia and China alone that were receiving tax dollars for animal experiments or were eligible to. And in late 2019, we contacted the White House. This is when there was a mysterious pneumonia circulating in China and other parts of the world that started to pop up. And we noticed that on the list of 30 laboratories in China that were eligible to get tax dollars, the Wuhan Institute of Virology was on there. So we made an appointment for a meeting with the White House, and in early January 2020, met with them to express our concerns about the fact that so much money was flowing to these foreign labs, including to this lab in Wuhan, that the records that we had seen showed they were taking these wild bat viruses that were going into caves, collecting bats, sampling viruses from them, taking some of the bats back to a lab, and then taking these wild viruses and supercharging them to make them more dangerous and more transmissible, more contagious. So more dangerous and more contagious to humans. It actually took us many months to get someone to run with this story. From January to April of 2020, we were trying to get members of Congress and get reporters to pay attention to what was going on in Wuhan and our concerns about what may have happened there. Finally, in April 2020, we exposed the NIH's funding of the Wuhan lab and kind of went viral and launched our campaign to investigate the lab leak and shut down funding for the Wuhan lab.
Wow, it's amazing. And so April 2020, so it's an issue we've been working on for just about 3 years now, right? So what do you feel, what's been our biggest contribution to the investigation of COVID's origins? What contributions have White Coat Waste made to it?
I mean, I'd love to turn this over to Daniel. So Daniel is our guy on the ground, getting these records in the door when they first come in from the government, when we submit Freedom of Information Act requests. And he's the one analyzing these documents in detail and letting us know what's in there of relevance. And he's been behind some of our biggest discoveries. So I'd love to get his feedback on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I think first and foremost, the fact that we were the ones that put the EcoHealth grant on people's eyes in April 2020, I think that was big. And the fact that that viral story went all the way up to the president, and we had a reporter ask the president about it, given the information that we provided or in the article, I think that was big, because in a matter of a few days, that grant was canceled, thankfully. And then since then, we've submitted several Freedom of Information Act to the National Institutes of Health and other government agencies. We've sued the NIH for those records because they decided to just take it very, very slowly and be kind of secretive about it. So in 2021, we finally got the records we sued them for. And I feel for me, the biggest thing is on reading the emails that the NIH was sending with EcoHealth, talking about their gain of function grant. For those who don't know, between 2014 and 2017, there was a complete shutdown and ban of government funding for gain of function experiments. And they were talking about it because this was big in this side of science. And then we have an email from the head of EcoHealth Alliance saying, terrific. We are happy that our gain of function pause has been lifted. And now, mind you, this was before the government officially decided to lift that moratorium in 2017. So what happened is between these emails, the NIH was telling EcoHealth, we think the work that you're doing in China is gain of function. And they are like, no, it's not. And then the government is like, okay, tell us why. So they basically told EcoHealth, tell me why I am wrong. And they wrote exactly the script of why this was not gain of function. And the government was like, perfect, keep going. And they mentioned gain of function as what was being held. So by definition, they shouldn't have been doing this. And then there is this whole debacle of EcoHealth taking years to submit their annual reports. And when they finally come to light, they show that like some of the viruses that they were manipulating in Wuhan, they indeed increased their danger to people. I think for me, all of these commentaries and the fact that like bats, the horseshoe bats, the ones that carry the closest relative to SARS-CoV-2, are nowhere near Wuhan. And the fact that there's like this Wuhan lab here studying coronaviruses, like that for me was the main thing, right? Like before I even knew about this, I was also like, oh yeah, viruses came from like wet markets because that's generally what you learn. But then you know that there's like this lab hyper like modifying these viruses and making it more difficult, that like it makes sense. And then you read like how bad the conditions were. There was a very good scoop by a reporter, Josh Rogan, that basically said like the State Department has been telling the safety conditions here are not good. So that's where it was for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Anthony Fauci and other people were denying that they funded gain of function experiments at the Wuhan Institute. And then we find these blockbuster emails through our investigation, literally with the NIH and EcoHealth Alliance conspiring in writing to violate the gain of function ban and do these dangerous experiments that we now believe not only we, the Department of Energy, the FBI, former heads of the CDC and the FDA, all of these people believe that the lab leak is the most likely explanation for the pandemic because, as Daniel said, these bats, horseshoe bats, are not just flying around Wuhan. Wuhan is a large metropolitan city with something like 15 million people living there. These viruses were brought into the city from very far away, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, brought into the city and then manipulated in these animal experiments. And what they do is they genetically modify these mice to have human lung receptors, and then they manipulate the viruses to attach specifically to those human lung receptors. And what they found is these mice got incredibly sick and most of them were dying. So the experiments were incredibly cruel, but they did show us that you could, and the government did fund these experiments that created these new chimeric super viruses that could hurt people in a way that they couldn't before.
Okay, thank you. What are some of the most recent developments we've had on the campaign? What kind of progress do you think we've made so far and going forward?
So, I mean, the biggest developments over the last few weeks, actually early this week, Joe Biden signed legislation into law declassifying all intelligence we have on COVID origins. And this is something, we've been pushing for this since 2020, and actually we've been supporting this legislation since 2021. And it just passed unanimously through Congress. And this again directs the intelligence community to declassify the information it has about the lab leak. So that was a huge development this week. And then in the last couple of weeks, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have the Department of Energy coming out and saying after it's reviewed all of the evidence, it believes with moderate confidence, which is the highest level of confidence that any federal agency has demonstrated yet. They believe with moderate confidence that a lab leak caused the pandemic. The head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, came out also saying the same thing. And you also have Deborah Birx, former COVID coordinator, coming out and saying the same thing. And you have Robert Redfield, the former head of the CDC, a virologist, on TV the other day saying not only does he think the lab leak caused the pandemic, but he thinks the next pandemic is going to be caused by this dangerous gain of function animal experimentation unless we ban it. So listen, we have some of the smartest minds in this country. We have some leading medical experts who've run this country's public health system saying it looks like this came out of a lab and we need to take steps to prevent it from happening again. So we're working with Congress now, to defund the Wuhan lab, defund gain of function research, defund EcoHealth, and we got to take the money away from all these bad actors who don't have our best interest in mind. These are greedy white coats who are wasting our money around the world, causing pandemics, torturing animals, and it's got to stop. And we're really proud to be the first ones to expose what was happening in Wuhan. And we're, literally leading the charge on Capitol Hill. There aren't many other advocacy groups, if any, up there working on these issues. And we're up there every day talking to members of Congress and their staff and lobbying them to modernize our laws and make sure taxpayers aren't being forced to pay for these dangerous experiments.
Absolutely. So you did just touch on it, what we're currently working on. What are our next steps? What should people expect to see from us going forward?
And we've been making great progress to slowly crack down on this stuff. So last year, we enacted legislation through the spending bills that prevents dangerous virus experiments in countries of concern like China and Russia. So that's a big deal. Basically, that'll prevent gain-of-function experimentation happening in countries that don't have our best interests in mind, that are adversaries or enemies or whatever, however you want to refer to them. But we need to do more, because there's a lot of other nasty experimentation on animals happening in these foreign labs that is not gain of function. It's not just virus experiments. We exposed in Russia last year how they're crippling cats and torturing them and cutting their brain stems and putting them on treadmills in horrible experiments. So there's things happening in some of these foreign labs beyond just the virus experiments. So we're working on legislation that would completely cut off any animal labs in countries like Russia and China that are our foreign adversaries. And we permanently want to disqualify the Wuhan Institute from receiving tax dollars. And let me just explain here for a moment. Obviously, many people, 2/3 of taxpayers, the most recent national polls, independent polls, show that 2/3 of taxpayers believe that the pandemic was started by a lab leak. The federal government, many in the federal government believe that. And the NIH itself, its watchdog, has called for the Wuhan lab to be disqualified and permanently blacklisted from receiving money again. However, I just checked, as of this morning, despite everything we've said, the Wuhan Institute of Virology is still eligible to receive more taxpayer funding for animal experiments. So the NIH could literally write a grant today and give the Wuhan Institute more money for animal experimentation. That has to stop, and it's at the top of our priority list, is defunding this lab and making sure it can never get another red cent of our tax dollars.
Absolutely. Well said. And exciting stuff. Lots to keep up with in the next coming months, hopefully. And I've got one more question, and then I'll ask you guys some of the questions we've gotten in the comments. But if we could leave our viewers with one key takeaway, what would you want them to remember about this campaign or about White Coat Waste Project in general?
Daniel, you want to go? How are you?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I'm going to steal some of the words that we used for our other viral campaign, Beaglegate. This is a campaign where we are looking for the best interest, not only for the animals that are in these experiments, but also for the people. Like, if we are targeting individuals, it's because these individuals have or had the authority to do this. The lab leak hypothesis is no longer a partisan issue. Like Justin said, 60% of taxpayers believe it came from a lab, and it doesn't matter if they vote for one or the other party. And we do this because we don't want to see another 3 years of pandemic like we've seen here. We are really, really concerned about the dangers of these experiments, and we don't want them to happen again. And I think the government and these institutions have proved that they're not ready to work in modifying these pathogens the way that they did. And we are very concerned. I am very concerned for my life and my family's life when all of this is happening. Not too far from here. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, and there is a lot of high biosafety labs here. So this is not only a criticism of what happens in China, it is also a criticism of what can happen in my backyard, almost literally. So that for me is the biggest takeaway of this. I want to make clear to everyone that these government bureaucrats are definitely, it's their responsibility, and that's why we target them. And it is not for any political gain or anything. It is just because we're highly concerned of the dangers of these experiments. So that for me is what I want to make super, super clear.
I think that is great and really important to emphasize, I think. We did get a couple questions in the comments. We have from Tanner. How is White Coat Waste so successful on shutting down labs, I guess, in general?
We are, we are laser focused on our mission, which is stopping taxpayer-funded animal experiments, and we will work with anyone and everyone who agrees with us on that one goal. So we have no political litmus test for our members or members of Congress. We work with the Freedom Caucus, we work with the Squad, we work with everyone in between. We like to say we unite liberty lovers and animal lovers, libertarians and vegetarians, right? We're a wide tent organization. And the truth is that we want to widen the tent. We want to grow this movement. We want to bring in new blood, because everyone has a stake in this, like Daniel was saying, whether it's for public health reasons or animal welfare reasons or government waste or whatever concerns you. This issue touches everything. And I had COVID last month for the first time, and I was sick and I was miserable and I was laying in bed, and all I kept thinking was that there are government employees, bureaucrats in the government, both in the United States and ones who are working in China, who are responsible for this. This didn't just miraculously, again, even if you believe in the wet markets, humans are somehow responsible for this. But if you believe in the lab leak, there were people in the government who were making decisions that set us on this path, and that also tried to cover up those bad decisions. And we have a very clear track record of that. So there are people in the government who we need to hold accountable to make sure this doesn't happen again. So there's protections we can put in place, but we also need to change the culture of these agencies and that's why we try to defund these projects, because we know we can't trust these greedy white coats to take our best interests in mind and make those decisions based on what's right for us. They're making decisions based on what's right for themselves and their friends and their pocketbooks. And that's what got us into this mess in the first place.
And we have another one. What progress, has White Coat Waste made on defunding the EcoHealth grant? I think we touched on it a little bit, but the rest of the comment says, I saw that there was a possibility they might still be able to receive funding in the future. Comments on that?
Daniel, want to talk about that since you did the analysis recently?
Yeah. So unfortunately, Alliance is still eligible and has still received millions of dollars. If I remember correctly, $46 million since the pandemic started. So from the moment that the pandemic started and shortly after White Coat Waste exposes this grant, EcoHealth has not only put obstacles on getting to the bottom of this, but they have actually gotten more and more grants. They have grants that look almost exactly like the one that they had in Wuhan, but now in the Philippines or in Bangladesh. So this is very concerning. We, if I remember correctly, have introduced or helped introduce, supported the introduction of bills that would defund EcoHealth as well. And Justin can touch on the progress of that. But yeah, that's what we've been working on. Like, we are not letting anything escape. We are checking that EcoHealth is compliant with the law, that EcoHealth remains accountable for the actions that they've done, and every chance of just highlighting how EcoHealth is basically getting scot-free from all of this mess is, I think, the more reason why we should be vigilant about what they do. Again, it's a shame that they're still receiving money, and I personally am not going to stop investigating and doing my research until I see that they are also barred from getting taxpayer funding. They have proved to be just a bad faith actor in all of this. They, in one hand, throw the NIH under the bus for whatever practices they have, and on the other hand, are asking the government for more and more money. And it's a shame that the government can't see this, or is willfully not taking the clues that are out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that really underscores the importance of our work. And a few people have asked about that, why we're effective and what we're doing. We're like a dog on a bone. EcoHealth may have caused this pandemic. And like Daniel said, unfortunately, since the pandemic began alone, they've gotten $46 million in new taxpayer money, both grants and contracts, including $1.5 million in bailout money, pandemic bailout money for a pandemic they probably caused. And some of these experiments that they're currently being funded for involve taking highly dangerous viruses and bringing them in labs and then doing experiments on hamsters and humanized mice and other animals, virus hunting around the world, collecting more of these dangerous viruses from the wild. And some of their money is like coming from the Defense Department's weapons of mass destruction accounts. And there's a long history of the government funding things that are, on the border, between bioweapons and biosafety, and it's all in the eye of the beholder. You know what I mean? Like a supercharged virus, yeah, you can do experiments on it to develop a vaccine, but it could also be used for evil purposes. And that's why it's so scary that we're doing this work in other countries, some where there's literally no oversight of laboratories, but certainly, we've documented very clearly that the US government virtually has no oversight and there's no accountability once the money goes to these foreign labs. There's no inspections. There's basically no reporting. It is a free-for-all. It is very scary. This stuff, I always hated animal experimentation because it was cruel, but the last 3 years has made it so scary when you see what happened in Wuhan and how people in the government want to cover it up and continue to do the same thing over and over again. And the NIH is fighting us right now. They want more gain of function in China. Let me say that again so you can hear it. We have a video of the NIH's lobbyist basically saying she's going to fight Congress on efforts to defund gain of function in China and other foreign countries, after we just probably caused a pandemic doing that exact same thing. Yep. So they haven't learned their lesson, and that's why we're aggressive, and we work with members of Congress who are aggressive and aren't going to take the NIH's crap and are going to hold them accountable and just cut their money and stop, buying their crap and their lies, and just prevent them from using this money to hurt animals and hurt taxpayers.
Absolutely. Very well said. I hope that riles up some of our viewers here too. I don't see any more questions or comments in the chat here, so I just want to thank everyone so much for tuning in. Justin and Daniel for all of the work that they've done on this, answering some of our hard-hitting questions surrounding this. And again, if anyone's interested in more information, we have tons of blogs and web pages on it. Feel free to send us a message too, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stop the money, stop the madness.
Stop the money, stop the madness. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.